All right, let's dive into the reread. We're on chapter 2.
Are we doing a recap?
Yeah, we do the recap, and then let's see. Whoa, where is my recap? I thought I had this in
No,
here.
I just did it. I did it. You just changed it real quick. The recap of last week, which would be chapter 1. Bran. Bran heads off to see his father fulfill his duty, and he must take a man's life for deserting the Night's Watch. On the road back, his brothers, Robb and Jon, find a pack of direwolf pups. Jon convinces Lord Stark to allow the children to keep the direwolf as pets by counting himself out as one of Lord Stark's true children. But to Jon's surprise, he gets a wolf as well.
Yeah, and so in that last chapter, I think this one picks up right, after that. But it's interesting just that we talked about this before. All the symbolism, all the things that happen there. Jon I don't know, the good nature of Jon to do that, right? And you can only imagine from like Ned's point of view to see his air quote son, do this is huge, and for him to step back and say, "Let me make the numbers work," you know what I mean? Because otherwise, and they hadn't seen a direwolf, south of the wall,
200 years.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a big deal. So, and it's actually something that worries.
How did the direwolf get south of the wall?
Wow, that's a good question. Maybe it always lived south of the wall, and it just, had been.
Yeah.
They're stealthy, Maybe it just was in the woods and no one knew.
Okay.
Or something. It's a great question, though.
How did all this stuff get south of the wall? I thought the wall was like, we know Mance Rayder probably gets south of the wall.
Well,
he just climbs it. He's
right,
the boss.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, could a direwolf swim around the wall?
Maybe.
I actually just think that there were some, maybe like one or two, like that just never, were seen or whatever. They're stealthy, even though they're massive.
Yeah.
So, anyways, this is something that worries Catelyn Tully / Stark, in the beginning of this chapter. So we'll kind of get into that here in a sec. The summary for this chapter: Catelyn Stark walks in to see Ned Stark as he cleans his sword. Ice. He's in the Godswood. Catelyn describes the Godswood and the differences between the various faiths and religions, specifically the Old Gods and the Seven. She has, quote, grievous news. Jon Arryn is dead. Ned reminisces about his childhood in the Eyrie and learns that Robert Baratheon is coming north to see him. So the king from King's Landing, King Robert Baratheon, is coming north.
Ours is the Fury.
And, that actually excites, and Ned is happy about that. That's good news, for the time being, right? Especially after he got this news that his, essentially father figure, Jon Arryn, is dead. And it's unexpected, and, it's untimely, so, it's sad for them. But, all right, there's your summary. Let's dive into the details here. We've divided this up into a couple of different thirds, I believe. So we've got Cat and the Gods. We've got the death of Jon Arryn, and then we have the King is coming north. So we'll talk about those. Let's start with the. Did you have something? You want to do like the one big takeaway thing? Did you have like a big takeaway that you wanted to?
Yeah. So my biggest takeaway.
And that could be anywhere. It doesn't have to be in the first third or what have you.
My biggest takeaway, I kind of have two, but I'll wait till we're done to get to it when I get to the cool connections part.
Yeah.
These words gave her a chill, as they always did. The Stark words. Every noble house had its words. Family mottos, touchstones, prayers of sorts. They boasted of honor and glory, promised loyalty and truth, swore faith and courage. All but the Starks. Winter is coming. Said the Stark words. Not for the first time, she reflected on what a strange people these Northerners were.
Yeah.
And that's my specific note of the week. And the reason I find it so interesting is, again, here we are, and I guess you could call it the third chapter if you include the prologue. And this chapter once again shows the difference between the North and the South, not just in the region. They talk about the trees, but also the gods.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Another big part. So it's the third time we've gotten that difference there's a big difference between the North and the South.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And once again, the idea that winter is the ultimate enemy.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I just kind of lost. Well, I'll just read this. This is not anything huge or major, but it's sort of the big focus of what I want to talk about in this chapter. As Catelyn walks in, she's describing the Godswood, and she says, or it's mentioned that every castle had its Godswood, and every Godswood had its heart tree, and every heart tree its face. And to kind of dive in, or are we okay just to dive into like the first third?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So to kind of dive in with some of this, to learn about these two different faiths / religions, I think we both have notes on this. Talking about the old gods, those were gods that they were more
The nameless gods.
The nameless god, yeah, and just like the more that they were like spirits, right? Like this of the forest or of the river or whatever it may be, stones, and it was when the Andals came over, they brought with them the seven, right?
The named gods.
The
As
named
opposed to
gods.
nameless ones.
Yes. And so yeah, they bring over different gods, and that's when you have this whole bit, this war. Well, it starts with this war with the children, and it will continue on when you have the Andals as well. So just that they're cutting down weirwood trees, they're bringing their own faith into the seven kingdoms. Most of the seven kingdoms worships the seven, so most of them do. A select few up in the north worship the old gods, and we actually had a reference to that in the first chapter where just the old ways. Ned was talking about why he swings the sword, and I think that's kind of neat that they still practice. There really is no with the old gods. There's really no like prayer or ritual or words that you say in front of a weirwood in terms of worship. It's almost just like you're there and you appreciate it. You may say different. There's just no like, here's your saying. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's a lot of sayings with the named gods.
Yeah, I was working on chapter 1, which we covered in our prologue, and we covered way back when we first started the World of Ice and Fire read through. Working on it for the YouTube video, and so I was just doing like a bigger, lengthier summary. And it's actually the children of the forest who are the ones who kind of created it, in that they would worship like the stream or the trees or whatever. It's kind of similar here to when you think of like American culture. Like you have the Native Americans who did worship more kind of like, like the land and nature and stuff like that. And then you have like the Europeans coming over and bringing like Christianity and stuff like that.
That's a really good point. Actually, because that makes sense. I mean, it was all about nature and the earth and the sun and the moon and different things. But this is Christianity brings over Jesus Christ. You know
absolutely.
What I mean?
Yeah.
And so you've got a figure to sort of worship. Something interesting about the old gods. So prayers are done in silence. Blood sacrifice at one point was performed. And I think this is interesting. They used to sort of hang like the entrails and bodies of criminals or traitors in the branches of weirwoods after they were executed.
Yeah.
So you talk about like sort of a barbaric, older faith. I mean, this is that's why Kat kind of says like these Northerners are difficult people to understand. So there's still a lot of that going on. So let's talk about the seven though, real quick. In the faith, this is known to as the faith or the faith of the seven, the named gods. You have the father, the mother, the warrior, the smith, the maid, the crone, the stranger. So, and they each have different faces, and Catelyn is kind of talking about how she knows what each of those look like, and she knows what to say and what to pray to each of them. Right? There's a prayer for each of them. You go to the mother for certain things versus, going to the warrior. You have different purposes in going to those different gods. So I thought that was kind of interesting, just the difference. And we'll see that a lot of people swear by the old gods and the new gods too. So you'll hear that phrase a lot. We're swearing by the old and the new.
Well, that's also, they reference, I have it highlighted here. It's not just the difference between the gods, but the difference in how you worship the gods. I'm going to read this. Catelyn had been anointed with the 7 oils and named in the rainbow of light that filled the sept of Riverrun. She was of the faith like her father and grandfather and his father before him. Her gods had names, and their faces were as familiar as the faces of her parents. Worship was a septon with a censer and smell of incense. A 7-sided crystal alive with light, voices raised in song. The Tullys kept a Godswood, all the great houses did, but it was only a place to walk or read or lie in the sun. Worshipped was for the sept.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, they're night and day different. I mean, they're, very different faiths. And so something neat right after that, though, is that, Ned actually builds a small sept for her. So she has a place to go do that. So she can kind of, sing to her gods. She can pray to them, and different things. She always gets a little bit nervous, and it's kind of eerie when she walks into the Godswood, especially in the north. Maybe not so. She makes that, that note that down, where she grew up, that it maybe was more just a beautiful place to walk. You know?
There's a line. I'm trying to find it here. It's where she goes and sits next to Ned, and it says she has her back to the weirwood because she feels like it's watching. It's
still watching her. That's right. Yes. Yeah. Well, how do you think I think it talks later about this and how she raises their kids. I mean, because you imagine that would be, when you have households that are mixed, where you've got like, Catholic and Christian, or, Jewish and Catholic, how do you raise your children, right? In a split sort of household. I think Sansa, I think they all sort of know, they're all taught about the 7, right? And they all sort of understand how to praise and worship the 7.
Right.
Do you think that? I mean, I think, except for Jon,
I don't know. That's something that I don't really feel like is ever mentioned much.
I think later on, like Sansa knows, like when she has to go, when she's down in King's Landing, I think she knows how to, the prayers to say and different things like that. But I love that when she's in trouble later on, she seeks the weirwood, the Godswood, and so that's kind of cool. But I mean, most of them are they're Starks. You know what I mean? They're at Winterfell, so the old gods are their gods. But Sansa's the one who always kind of felt like, more like her mother.
Yeah, for sure.
Wanted to be a lady of the court and things like that. So she is well versed in all of those, different things. The first thing that, Ned asked when Catelyn sat down, where are the children?
Yeah.
And you're going to talk about this later, but from his point of view, that's the first thing he's asking about. He looks up, he sees her. She probably looks concerned. Yeah. You know what I mean? Obviously she doesn't like this place, but we know that she has bad news. Right. And he immediately, when he sees her, she's safe. Where are the children? They're in Winterfell, but there's this sense of like and you look at his past and things that have happened, he just wants to make sure everything's okay.
Yep.
So, and they're in the kitchen going over names for their direwolves, which is awesome. So,
all right, should we dive into the second, third?
Yeah, let's dive into the second one, the death of Jon Arryn.
Yeah,
because that's the news that we get right out the gate here. Sad news, grievous news,
and she just gives it to Ned straight.
She does.
No other way. There's no other way to say it, which I thought was a cool line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's see. How does she? There is grievous news today, my lord. I did not wish to trouble you until you had cleansed yourself. There was no way to soften the blow. She told him straight, I am so sorry, my love. Jon Arryn is dead.
Yeah.
She shoots straight, and it cuts him. She could see the hurt in his eyes. She could tell that, she knew that he was fostered at the Eyrie in his youth. So let's talk about that. Again, we're going to get into some of the histories here. Who is Jon Arryn? His titles include, he is the Lord of the Eyrie, Defender of the Vale, Warden of the East. He is currently serving as Hand of the King to Robert Baratheon. Mm-hmm. Now, during the time before Robert's rebellion, he also had those were his titles. I mean, he was, Warden of the East. Big deal.
Yeah.
Okay. No slouch of a character. And so he actually he has no kids. That's we have to talk about that first, because he had a couple wives. One dies in childbirth. Another one just died from feebleness or just being weak or a sickness. They couldn't have any children. So, I mean, he takes on, Robert Baratheon and Ned Stark. I mean, those are his, he has them, he's raising them, he's
right.
I don't know. I mean, it's they were sent there. Robert was the first son, but Ned wasn't. So anyways, but they're raised at the Eyrie. An interesting point here that I want to make is Jon has a younger brother, Ronald, and a sister. Is it Alice? Is that it? I think.
Yeah.
Who married Sir Ellis Waynwood. Okay. Now, the reason I wanted to bring up the brother Ronald is that, he has a son who becomes, it's Elbert Aaron, and he actually, since Jon doesn't have any children, he is going to be heir to, the
House
Vale.
Aaron,
Yeah. And so, what... Don't even know if we want to do this yet, but I'm going to do it. I don't care. You know what? Bend the knee. All right.
Yeah.
When you talk about Robert's rebellion and you talk about reasons why things happen, I believe Jon Arryn was one of the first people to call his banners.
Yeah.
And go and that's how the war starts. I mean, you have to imagine he has two sons, right? He's got Ned and he has Robert, and those are his sons, and he loves them. And when you find out that Lyanna Stark is captured, kidnapped by Rhaegar, they send Elbert Aaron down to King's Landing with everybody else. And Elbert Aaron is murdered with all of them, down there. That's a big deal. And I've always sort of, in my studying here today, like this week, getting ready for this, I wanted to know more about the Eyrie and the
Vale.
The Vale, yeah. And the Aaron family, because it comes into play later when Sansa gets there, but
it's not really one that is like mentioned a lot in the show,
and it's later in the books.
In the books too, yeah. The line right here: his eyes found hers, and she could see how hard it took him. This is when she's telling him Jon Arryn is dead.
Yeah,
as she had known it would. In his youth, Ned had fostered in the Eyrie, and the childless Lord at the childless Lord Aaron had become a second father to him and his fellow ward Robert Baratheon. When the Mad King Aerys II Targaryen had demanded their heads, the Lord of the Eyrie had raised his moon and falcon banners in revolt rather than giving up those who he had pledged to protect.
Right. Well, part of that was they went down to demand that they wanted Rhaegar's head.
Yep. For
kidnapping her. And I mean,
Lyanna Stark, yeah.
As far as they knew, he kidnapped her, and maybe he did. I mean,
we don't know, yeah.
We don't really know. So he kidnaps her. So the Starks are going down, and Robert Baratheon is, he's betrothed to her at this time, and so you can see from Jon Arryn's point of view how hurt, Ned, his sister, is kidnapped, and then Robert, this is his, to-be wife, is gone. So he sends his heir down there, which is crazy. Elbert Aaron goes down and is killed. I mean, it's a big deal, and then they send for their fathers to come down as well. So. They actually sent. Brandon Stark went as well, and he was, killed too. So, anyways, it's kind of crazy to think about Jon, because we always see him as this older guy. He's kind-hearted, he's kindly. He's very trusting and things like that. To see him call his banners is cool because the Vale doesn't really do much in this series. They kind of play a quiet role,
right?
And for them to be a big part of the rebellion it's almost like they've done their, they've played their part in the rebellion. And so they're almost like, okay, yeah, you guys are, especially with Robert Baratheon sitting on the throne, they've got a special, spot in his heart. But anyways, yeah. So, I mean, that's sort of your history, is the context, the backstory to how Jon Arryn is significant to them. Jon Arryn later, though, as a part of the rebellion to kind of unite some houses, the Tullys, it's actually funny. Ned and Jon both become like brothers. Right. They become brothers because they take,
Tully wives.
Yeah. And how cool is that?
Yeah.
So, what else do we have here though? Just concerning, Jon Arryn and his, just some different things here. Oh, then he later on has, more history here, which this will all come up later as well, so I don't want to spoil too much of it.
I mean,
but
he does have a son later.
He does have a son later,
With
yeah.
Liza Tully, yeah.
Right, with Liza. And at the time, though, when that happens, he's old. I mean,
Yeah, he's old, yeah.
He's missing some teeth,
Yeah.
He's she's making comments about his breath and different things. So yeah, that's something. Something that when I was doing my research that I kind of forgot about, Robert Baratheon actually had and this will come up later, a bastard in the Vale.
I don't doubt it.
Don't doubt it, right? He already had one there. He was just sort of a rowdy youth, you know what I mean? Just sort of like whatever. And then after that, he's struck by this, like, he's betrothed to Lyanna Stark, but he also loves her. Yeah. And I've heard people say that he just, even Ned kind of says, whether he truly, he loved, he saw the beauty of Lyanna. Did he see all the other characteristics and awesomeness to her?
Right.
Was what Ned always, in a small part of it, the back of his mind, kind of reserved to that thought that maybe he did. Maybe that's really the only reason he, just. Also, she's the one that got away. I mean, he never had a chance to to be that way. I mean, I think even Lyanna at one point makes a statement that he couldn't keep to one bed,
right? Oh, absolutely.
Or something. But but also, it's sort of like. He would have. I feel like there still would have been a better marriage, and relate. Like he. I don't know. I feel like the thing with Cersei, he would not have treated her the way that he treats Cersei.
Oh, absolutely not.
So
yeah.
It just
right.
But anyway, sorry, I took us down a tangent there.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
Just to kind of understand Robert and this rebellion, which Matt and I are going to do more like an actual history, a comb through of Robert's rebellion and the tourney at Harrenhal. So that's coming soon. But I guess it's really about the significance of it. Catelyn goes on to kind of, just, sympathize with Ned, right. And that, I know how much this means to you, and he was like a father to you, as you mentioned. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And
I think the last part here, we're going to jump into that.
Yeah.
The king is coming north.
Absolutely.
That's a big deal.
It's a big deal. Yeah. She gives, Ned tells Catelyn when she's talking about Jon Arryn, he says, please go to the Vale, comfort your sister. And she's like, I would if I could.
Right.
But I have other news. The king is coming north. And then we see Ned's face kind of lights up. He's like, Robert?
Yeah.
Robert's coming?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not very long in the chapter. This chapter is also not very long as well.
Right now, yeah.
The audiobook version was like 13 minutes.
Yeah, 19
minutes, something like that. And so anyway, we just find out that Robert's riding north, and he's bringing his brothers, or he's bringing the Lannister brothers are coming. He's married to House Lannister, and Catelyn says that the Queen's pride grows every day.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And we just know that they're going to have a feast, and that's pretty much about it. But we just know that the king is coming, and he's seeking Ned out.
Right.
Yeah.
And Catelyn Tully has heard people in the yard talking about the signs. Mm-hmm. And she admired Ned because he doesn't, believe in the signs as much. I mean, he's just sort of like, it is what it is. A direwolf was killed with an antler,
right.
Whatever. I mean, whatever. I mean, but to everyone else at Winterfell, it's like, oh, what does this mean? What does this mean?
Yeah, and that was my big takeaway last week.
Yeah, and
I kind of forgot that she had thought that.
Yeah.
So when I read that this week, I was like, oh, I said that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and she does. I mean, she's super concerned about it, but appreciates that Ned doesn't concern himself with it. It's like he's just a real. It's like life will be what life will be. I'm not gonna, give a lot of weight to these different signs and symbols that I can't control and stuff. So, but everyone's talking about it, and so it is kind of interesting. It's good to see that he's excited. This is good news to him, and like you said, it's he asked about the children. He's like, how old are the children, and you learn that Bran and Tommen are about this, they're 7 each, same age, and he's a little upset that Jaime Lannister and Tyrion Lannister are going to be there, but it is what it is. He's like, gods, how are we going to feed them all, and stuff, but they kind of brush over his disgruntledness with the Lannisters. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just a quick, we don't have to look anything up here or whatever, but just, you and I can talk briefly about what happened during Robert's Rebellion that would cause him to be that way.
Yeah.
Why is he okay with, the other kingdoms, but then not necessarily, the Lannister kingdom, right? I mean, why is it that he has issues there?
Right.
And it's simply just because they came, I think it says in this chapter, they came to Robert's,
rebellion at the very, very end.
When it was clear that victory, was to be had.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and then he has the showdown with the Kingslayer, Jaime Lannister. They are both there, and Ned is able to take the throne. I mean, if he wanted to sit on that throne, he could have, but it wasn't his rebellion.
Right.
And I think that's what he kind of knew, is that this is not my rebellion. We're rallying behind, Robert. And also he was a second son, so he was not necessarily...
He also doesn't care.
Right. He doesn't want that, but also I do think some of it comes... If this were Brandon Stark, and you know what I mean? I actually think, and he's bred to be like, I'm ready to be a leader or whatever, I think those two would have had... Brandon is older than Robert, I believe, and I think it would have been more of a Stark rebellion. I mean, the reasons that the Starks are involved, one is it's a sister,
right.
It's there, but it's also their lord was just killed, and Brandon, and so Ned is like all of a sudden
had they just killed
their father,
had they just killed the father. And then it was, okay, now it's a totally different...
Yeah, it's just a different dynamic. I don't think Robert really then cares too much about the throne,
Yeah, he just wants the honor.
He just wants blood, and he wants to face...
the honor back, yeah.
Exactly. So I think things are a little bit different there. But that's just part of why I think Robert was first son, and it's his rebellion, and it kind of turned into he's got to lead the charge here. And that's how Ned, and Jon Arryn become close. And the Kingslayer there, he kills King Aerys right before... They show up, and
stabs him right in the back, and then he's sitting in the Iron Throne.
Yeah,
just kind of like lounging in it.
Was he in the book or the movie?
I think in the book they just say he's just kind of like sitting in it. There's a lot of the fan art. On the Song of Ice and Fire wiki shows like Jaime like just kind of like lounging in the chair, and stuff like that. So.
Okay, yeah, I do just remember though, like it was offered to like Ned. Ned was leading a different force and was able to sack and get into King's Landing, and that was made easier because the Lannisters were there to kind of open the door. Here you go, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and not challenge that force. Just no need to. Just play on the Game of Thrones.
Yep.
So yeah, the king is coming north. Let me also throw in something here that wasn't in the chapter that I think everyone needs to know. There's a king coming north, but there's also a king coming south.
It actually is mentioned.
Is it mentioned?
It's mentioned in the chapter. Yeah, I was going to say that. Just one last time, guys. I just have to say it. Ned saw the dread on her face. Mance Rayder is nothing for us to fear.
Wow.
And Ned says, Ned lifted ice, looked down the cool steel length of it, and it will only grow worse. The day may come when I will have no choice but to call the banners and ride north to deal with this king beyond the wall.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't remember when
the third chapter in Mance Rayder is mentioned again.
Again, yeah.
I mean, it's chapter 2, but just for the kind
exactly.
of the prologue. Yeah.
Overall. Yeah, I mean, that's huge. That's a big moment. That's like an epic moment where it's like he is Warden of the North. He is to protect the Seven Kingdoms. It is his charge to do that, and he may have to take, the North to war beyond the wall, sort of like Stannis does later on. I mean, big deal. Could you imagine if we saw something like that? Would be epic.
Absolutely,
that would have been absolutely epic because they had giants and all sorts of things. I mean, they have a host. But he would have. I think he would have just manned the wall for a while too. Scouted it out, and I would love to have a discussion someday of like what would they have had to do to beat oh man, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But yeah, don't forget though the King Beyond, and I actually like the King Beyond the Wall.
Mance Rayder's a really cool character.
Really cool character.
May still be alive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is. Yeah, apparently, so far as I can tell. So, anyways, he's coming south, and he will be at this feast. He will be sitting there. So. We'll have to look for references to music and things when, the king gets there and they hold a feast and stuff like that. So something to look forward to. Yeah. So, all right, guys, that's chapter 2. It is a short one. Matt's got some cool connections, though, some vocab for this episode.
So some cool connections / vocab for this episode. Very early in the chapter, let me pull it up here. It says... Catelyn had been born a Tully at River Run far to the north on the Red Fork of the Trident. And I thought I would just, we're going to do 2. We're going to do the Trident and House Tully.
Okay. Awesome.
I thought it would be cool to talk about the Trident because it's a big deal. It's just also a pretty important place. It's kind of where the North and the South meet.
Yep.
It's the neck, right? That's where you have the Freys and the twins.
Right.
And
Just
stuff
south
like
of the
that.
twins. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the Trident is you have these 3 rivers that kind of split off. It is a major river in the Riverlands of the Seven Kingdoms, made of numerous smaller tributaries. It is one of the largest rivers on the continent of Westeros. It is a confluence of 3 main forks, the red, the green, and the blue, which join west of Lord Howarway's town and the crossroads and eventually flow into the Bay of Crabs. Salt pans and the Quiet Isle are located at the mouth of the Trident. And so that's just kind of like where it is in the map.
Right.
During Robert's rebellion, Lord Robert Baratheon defeated Prince Rhaegar Targaryen at the Battle of the Trident. This site became the site of Rhaegar's death became known as the Ruby Ford because when Robert slams him in the chest, you can see these rubies of his breastplate falling out. So it's just kind of a locale, kind of a place. You can pull up a map of Westeros and look at that.
Yeah, can I make a quick plug too there?
Yeah, go ahead.
The Trident, we actually had a big discussion last night with Sir David the Huntsman, who was here, and this is on our is this on our Patreon? No, this will be out.
This will be out. Just a theory, on the page,
So we're kind of getting you guys just, what we used to do on Second Breakfast was we would just do theories, we'd do Season 9 stuff, and we actually talked about where the final battle may happen, and we mentioned the Trident a lot.
Yeah.
And so I think it's cool that we're talking about it now in the beginning because I think it will come back to play at the end.
Yeah.
So
okay, and then my second one is House Tully because we hear that Catelyn even Ned says I should know better than to argue with a Tully.
Right.
Yeah. House Tully of Riverrun is one of the great houses of the Seven Kingdoms. Lord Hoster Tully, the Lord Paramount of the Trident, rules over the Riverlands from the Tully seat of Riverrun. Their sigil is a silver trout leaping on a striped field of blue and mud red, and their house words are family, duty, honor.
Yeah.
And I have a note here in the chapter at the very end. Family, duty, honor. This is chapter 2. Catelyn, her first chapter, because as we progress, we'll have to actually name it like the way the book does, where it's like they name the
Catelyn
POV, the POV chapters and stuff like that. Yeah. Cat starts the chapter talking of Bran and the children, and she's also like wanting to take care of Ned, family. The duty she has to tell Ned about Jon Arryn. It's her duty to tell him, I have to present you with this news, even though it's hard. She doesn't want to, so duty.
Right. Doesn't she even refer to him as Lord?
Yep.
Lord Stark.
Then honor, when she's talking about the queen, when Ned says something about him sucking at her teat, and he's like, Ned, that's like the queen. You can't say that. And so I just thought it was funny. Now they haven't actually said like family, duty, honor. This is the Tully thing. They don't say that in this chapter.
Yeah.
I just was doing research, and I kind of thought it was interesting that that's kind of the way this chapter plays out. And so I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I've always wanted to do is to get into the Tully connection, I'll call it, because the Tullys are greatly connected to other houses. There's a lot of alliances that are made with House Tully. And
it makes a lot of sense, too, if you look at where they're at. They're the great house of like the middle of Westeros.
Yeah, right. They're surrounded. I mean, it's so... Yeah, it's important that they have strong allies and stuff like that. So, Brendan Tully, is a big player, and he's the brother to Hoster Tully, and we get into him being the Blackfish later on, and all the things that happen. Yeah, he's sick. But yeah, I would love to, as we go, we'll be talking a lot about the Tullys and just sort of their connections, because there are tons of connections spread throughout the book. I mean, so many that I was overwhelmed when I first read it. I didn't quite understand who all they were connected with, and you really do need to almost look at a map sometimes because this stuff gets a little bit overwhelming. But yeah, I mean, great, that's cool. I love that we're talking